You have to do it with math and science because you got to practice it a lot. You just don't use it a lot. It's kind of like a foreign language. You're not gonna go home and like do chemistry typically.
I took off my glasses and I said I can't see the board.
Is that 0? 2 0?
Yeah. Calculator. Check to see if you got 40,338. Nice job, Elijah. Six goes on top, 100 goes on the bottom. The number should be larger than the half-life. Good question.
I knew that, so I thought that if the 100 was on top of the 0.76, then this number would still be larger.
Yeah, but the number should be a large number.
It's so staticky.
You're in the same color. Yeah, and I the same color shirt.
Make sure you use parentheses.
I probably knew that.
Parentheses.
Put these on.
Times. So did you get an answer?
Keeps giving me syntax error, and I get this right, but then I try to multiply it by this number that doesn't work.
All right, let me show you. So you're going to go log parentheses 0.76. That's what's given. That's where it now has. Divided by 100. Parentheses equals. Did you get that?
Oh no, I wasn't hitting the equals.
Okay. Then divide by log 0.5. You got that?
I would always get that answer, yes.
Okay. Now times 5730.
Okay.
I'll write that up there. Good job. All right, go ahead, Leonard.
The wavelength is the shortest distance between the equivalent points on a continuous wavelength. For example, in figure 5.2, the wavelength is measured from crest to crest or from drop to drop. Wavelength is usually expressed in
9.8.
If you can do that, come up to the board and you can solve for it. Madison, obviously, should raise their hand.
Let's set it out loud. I told
I didn't calculate it. That's going to be my only.
volumes of gas have equal numbers of molecules. 1 to the 3.
All right, so today is mold day. Today's mold day, Brandon. Mold day. And how was the mold determined? We talked about this before. How did they count to the mold? What did they use? Raise your hand. What did they use to count 602 sextillion things? You have three choices. The proton, the neutron, or the electron.
Proton!
Raise your hand for the electron.
That is the proton.
They use the electron. Right. So most chemistry is about the electron. This chapter, chapter 5, studies the electron. Brandon, yesterday we read about chapter 5, introducing it, the electron. So chemistry really is the study of the electron, and we use the electron to count the mole. That's why it's so significant. Now, what substance did they turn in? They took basically an ion and solution, and they ran electrons through it. Gold plating. Are you familiar with gold plating jewelry? Gold-plated jewelry. So what element did they plate to determine the gold? I mean, to determine the mole?
The electrons.
No, they didn't use gold.
Silver.
They didn't use platinum. Raise your hand.
Silver.
Yes, they used silver. They plated silver in the amount of the mass. They determined the mass of silver necessary, and they stopped when they got that mass, and they determined the electrical current used to get the mass, and then they said, okay, each electron associated with a silver atom, then we can count the charge, and the charge was associated with the mole. So each electron counted the atoms of silver, the charge, and we associated that charge with the number. Now, if you're not understanding this, every month you get an LG&E bill. The LG&E company will bill you for how much electricity you use. If you use more one month than another month, is your bill going to be lower?
Yes.
Well, if you use more, you're going to pay more. Does it make sense? So this can be done. The electrons can be used to count substances. Use monkeys to count the mole? Now, in this chapter 5, what are we reading about? Read yesterday in class. What did we read about? Cheating? Yes. Chapter 5, we read about electrons. Very good. So, what was used to count the mole? Electrons. Chemistry is the study of matter, right? Learned that earlier. But it's really the study of what the electrons are doing. There's a lot happening with electrons. Electricity, all medications. You go to the doctor, you get some medication. They're treating your electrons. Chemotherapy is all electron-based. Radiation is not electron-based. It is what based? Photon-based. So there's a photon, which is radiation, and then there's chemotherapy, which is electron-based. The electrons are attacking your cells to kill them in chemotherapy. They're targeting specific cells. So that's electron-based. Now, they did the electron. How did they use the electron? To count the mole. Remember we had a metal in solution, and they ran electricity through it, and what did they make? Not gold-plated, but what element did they use to count the mole? Raise your hand if you know. Now, we've talked about this before. I got it on video. Because y'all don't believe me, I'll tell you things and you forget. Max Planck. What does Planck's constant mean? Planck's constant can be defined in the units. So if we look at Planck's constant, this helps us understand what's going on. This is the amount of watts that are traveling per second. Why do we want to know that? Because time is typically, the unit of time is in seconds. So if you ask somebody what's the unit of time, they're going to say seconds. So we would like to know how much energy is moving per second. And that's what Planck's constant tells us. It's the amount of energy in the form of typically electrons that are moving per second. Planck's constant. Right here. That's number 1. Associated with time is seconds. So you see right here in seconds. So this energy is associated with the amount of energy that photons can have in a second. That's why it's important. So Planck's constant is associated with photons, and then from that you can use it to calculate the energy in electrons. But it states here that in the definition we just read that he's talking about energy in photons. It says right here, this equation allows us to calculate the energy of photons, which would be the particles of light, right? Now the question is, how was the mole counted? We've talked about this. We talked about gold plating. Remember we talked about gold plating jewelry?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you said something about being on top of the jewelry, something like that.
Right, so what is the title of this chapter?
EO jewelry.
Chapter 5. We read about it yesterday. Look on the back of your homework. What does the homework title say? Electrons and atoms. So what was used to count the mole? Starts with the E. The electron. Very good.